Ladies and gentlemen, meet my daughter. A total waste of good genetics. That was the first thing my father said into the microphone. He pointed his glass of Chateau Margaux at me and smiled like a shark. She crawls around in filth, taking care of society's garbage instead of carrying on my legacy. A tragedy, really. 300 guests laughed. They thought it was a joke. They didn't know I had a wireless microphone hidden in my sleeve. And they definitely didn't know I was about to turn his $25 million gala into a federal crime scene. Before I tell you exactly how I destroyed his career, 30 seconds later, let me know in the comments. Have you ever been humiliated by your own family? I want to know I'm not alone. I stepped out of the shadows. The sharp click of my heels on the marble floor cut through the lingering laughter like a knife. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy and dangerous. I walked straight up the stairs to the stage. My father looked at me, his eyes narrowing, expecting a tantrum or a tearful plea for respect. He expected the daughter he had bullied for 2 decades. He didn't get her. As I made my way toward him, the eyes of 300 guests followed me, each one wondering what this moment meant. His mocking grin faded, replaced by a hint of confusion. He was already thinking of the words to belittle me again, the rehearsed insults that had once been his go-to, but he wouldn't get the chance to speak. Not today. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He was too stunned to stop me. He stood there blinking as if the whole world had just shifted, unsure how to react. I, however, was clear. My grip on the microphone was firm, confident. I stood taller, feeling the weight of every inch of my growth, every step I had taken on my own, while he had refused to see me. And now, here I was. In front of all these people, his empire built on vanity and shallow respect teetering on the edge of collapse. He didn't recognize it yet, but his fall had already begun. I turned to the crowd, 300 faces waiting for the punchline, the laughter still echoing in the air. I held their attention, my own thoughts as sharp as the silence surrounding me. I knew what this moment was. This was my stage, my moment of power. I could feel the tension building, the collective breath of the room held in anticipation. This was it, the moment I had planned patiently for years. My father is right about one thing, I said, my voice steady and cold. It was clear. It was deliberate. I do work with the state's most vulnerable. There was a pause. They were expecting a joke. They were expecting me to play along, to laugh it off, to act like the joke he had made was just that, a joke. But I wasn't here for jokes anymore. I wasn't here to play the part he'd assigned to me. But I continued, the word hanging in the air. He left out my job title. There, that pause, that one breath of silence. I let it stretch, let the weight of my words sink in. I could feel their curiosity turn into confusion, then into recognition. My father's face, once flushed with arrogance, began to pale. His eyes darted a flicker of panic, crossing his face for the first time. But it was too late. I am the senior program officer for the State Health Fund, I said. Each word was deliberate, chosen for its precision, for its power. And I am the sole signatory with veto power over the $25 million grant Dr. Marcus has been begging for since January. The room didn't just go quiet. It froze. The air was sucked out of the ballroom. My father, once so proud of his control, his connections, his influence, was now standing in the middle of a stage he had built for himself, watching it crumble. His arrogance melted away in an instant. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. He was no longer relevant. I opened the thin black folder I had carried under my arm. The sound of it cutting through the silence felt like the snap of a trap closing. I wasn't just unveiling a proposal, I was unveiling the truth. This was no longer a gala. This was no longer a celebration. This was a reckoning. I glanced briefly at the wealthy donors in the front row, their faces now pale with disbelief. "Let's talk about this proposal, shall we?" I asked, turning the page. "A Center for Dignity Recovery. Sounds noble," I said, barely hiding the sarcasm. I flipped a page. My eyes scanned the figures, the inflated numbers, the misallocation. It didn't surprise me. It didn't even anger me. It was simply what I had come to expect from him, from his world of excess and greed. "But I did a line item audit this morning," I said. 80% of the budget is allocated for facility upgrades, imported Italian leather furniture for the executive offices, and marble flooring for the private lobby. Not a single cent is allocated for patient beds. I let the words hang in the air for a beat longer, watching the reactions in the room shift. I turned the page again. "Section 4, I said, my voice sharp. "Administrative transport. $300,000 for 2 luxury SUVs for a nonprofit serving the homeless." The disbelief in the room was palpable now. I turned to my father. He was trembling. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His facade of power and control was shattered, and for the first time in his life, he was looking at me not as a failure, not as the daughter he had abandoned, but as his reckoning. "This isn't a medical facility," I said into the microphone, my voice unwavering. "It's a retirement plan disguised as charity." I paused, looking at him, then at the crowd. I felt their collective breath, the tension building, each word pulling tighter. "Dr. Marcus, your application is formally rejected due to gross financial mismanagement and attempted fraud. You will never see a dime of state funding as long as I hold a pen." I didn't wait for him to respond. I didn't need to. I dropped the microphone. The sound it made when it hit the floor was deafening, a sharp thud that resonated through the speakers. I turned and walked off the stage. The crowd was still. The silence was so complete it was almost suffocating. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For 29 years, I had been the invisible girl, the disappointment, the joke. But tonight, under the lights, he paid for with money he didn't have. I was the only thing anyone could see. 10 years ago, in the mahogany library of his estate, my father held my acceptance letter to the state's top social work program. He didn't smile. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't even look up. He just crumpled the paper in his fist, walked over to the fireplace, and tossed it onto the flames. "You want to be a janitor for human refuse?" He had asked, his voice cold, dismissive, like my dreams didn't even matter. "Go ahead, but don't expect me to pay for you to ruin your life. You are dead to me the moment you walk out that door." The fire consumed the letter, and with it, every ounce of hope I had in him. That moment felt like the end of everything, like I had no future, no family, and no purpose. I thought that by cutting me off, by refusing to speak my name for a decade, he had erased me from the world. But fire doesn't just destroy things, it forges them. He thought that by rejecting me, by shoving me aside, he could take my future with him. But what he didn't know was that rejection wasn't going to break me, it was going to make me stronger. While he was busy building his empire of plastic surgery and vanity projects, I was building something entirely different. I worked double shifts. I put myself through night school. I earned my master's in public administration. living on ramen noodles and the cold, steady motivation of spite. I rose from being a caseworker to district manager and finally to a position on the state board. It was hard. No one gave me anything. I had to fight for every inch of progress. And every day in the back of my mind, I carried that image of him. The man who thought he had thrown me away. The man who thought he could erase me. He never knew what I was doing. He never asked. To him, I was just a ghost, a failure, the punchline he could use to feel superior in front of others. He had no idea I was rising. He had no idea I was becoming something he could never control. That blindness, that complete refusal to see me for who I had become was his fatal mistake. As I stood there on the stage looking down at him, I could see it in his eyes. He didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. He saw only the girl he had thrown away. He still thought I was a failure, still thought I was weak, still saw me as the thing he had abandoned all those years ago. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I had spent a decade building myself piece by piece, and the woman he was looking at now was nothing like the one he had tried to burn. I wasn't just the girl who had been humiliated and rejected. I was a force, an unstoppable current of everything he had tried to destroy. I had taken everything he had thrown at me and used it to build my own power. And now, here I was, standing on the stage, holding the microphone and taking control of the narrative. The truth is, I didn't need him. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his money, his name, or his connections. I had made my own way, and I had built my own success. He had thought he was the only one who could dictate the rules, the only one who could decide what was valuable. But the truth was, I had learned that power wasn't about who you knew or how much money you had. It was about strength. It was about resilience. And it was about the quiet, unyielding force of someone who refuses to be discarded, who refuses to be invisible. Tonight, under the spotlight, he paid for with money he didn't have. I was the one in control. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just a disappointment. I was everything he had never expected me to be. The truth is, I saw his grant application land on my digital desk 6 months ago. I saw the inflated numbers. I saw the shell companies listed as contractors. It didn't take long to see what he was trying to do. He had done this before, used his influence to get what he wanted, twisted the system for his own benefit. I could have rejected the application right then. I could have sent a quiet, professional email denying the funds. It would have been efficient, it would have been easy, and it would have been the logical thing to do. But I didn't want efficiency. I wanted justice. If I had rejected him quietly, he would have spun a story. He would have blamed the bureaucracy or bad luck or politics. He would have found a way to brush it off, to hide behind his charm and his money. He would have moved on like he always did without any real consequences. And I wasn't going to let that happen. So I waited. I waited for the perfect moment, the moment where his own arrogance would be his undoing. I let him believe he had already won. I approved the preliminary rounds. I watched him book the Grand Hotel. I watched him order the lobster, the vintage wine. I let him believe the deal was sealed, that nothing could stop him. I knew he would throw this gala, this celebration of his ego, to flaunt his supposed victory. And I knew the moment he gathered all of those important people, his witnesses, his audience, his supporters, that would be the moment when everything would come crashing down. I watched him. I watched him invite the wealthiest donors in the city, make them feel special, like they were part of something grand. He thought this was just another opportunity to show off another way to make everyone adore him. But what he didn't know was that he had built his own courtroom. He had hired his own jury, and he was about to pay for it. He thought the stage was his, that all eyes were on him. But I had already set the stage for him. He thought he was in control, but in reality, he had just walked right into my trap. The silence of the room as I walked up to the stage, he didn't expect it. He didn't expect me. And he certainly didn't expect what I was about to do. I had spent years being invisible, overlooked, discarded. I had spent years watching him build his empire, seeing the way he manipulated the world around him. But in all that time, I had been patient. I had been strategic. I had bided my time knowing that the right moment would come. And tonight, that moment had arrived. I had watched him build his empire of plastic surgery and vanity projects. I had watched him use people as stepping stones to get to the top, using his money to silence anyone who got in his way. But the truth was, he wasn't as untouchable as he thought. His wealth, his influence, they didn't matter to me. They didn't scare me. I had seen how the world worked, how it rewarded the greedy and the powerful. But I also knew how it punished them when their arrogance finally caught up with them. And as I stood there on that stage holding the microphone, I knew he was about to get a taste of that punishment. I knew he had walked into a trap of his own making. He thought he was going to shine tonight. He thought his gala was going to be a triumph. But instead, it was the perfect setup for his downfall. And all it took was for me to walk in, to say the right words, to reveal the truth. In that moment, I wasn't just taking control of the situation, I was taking control of my own life. I wasn't the invisible girl anymore. I wasn't the failure he had cast aside. I was the woman who had waited for the perfect moment, the woman who had planned this down to the smallest detail. And now, in front of all these people in front of him, I was about to show them all exactly who I had become. I pushed through the heavy service doors, leaving the murmurs of the ballroom behind me. The air in the staff corridor was cold, sharp, with the scent of industrial cleaner. I didn't run. I walked with the steady, measured pace of someone who had just finished a job. I wanted nothing more than to get to my car, to the quiet, to the end of this long, ugly chapter. But monsters don't just die because you cut off their food supply. Sometimes they get hungry. The door behind me slammed open, but it wasn't a normal entrance. It was a collision, the kind of force that shook the walls of the corridor. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The heavy, frantic breathing gave him away. "You stop right there." His voice echoed off the concrete walls, stripped of all its public polish. It was raw, ugly, wet with rage. I stopped, but I didn't turn around immediately. I let the tension stretch between us just a moment longer. Then I slowly turned, meeting his eyes. Dr. Marcus was standing there, his impeccable tuxedo rumpled, his face flushed with fury. Sweat beaded on his forehead and his veins were bulging, a stark contrast to the cold, collected person I had become. He lunged forward, closing the distance between us before I could step back. His hand grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin hard enough to bruise. "You think you can walk away?" He spat his words, bitter and desperate. "You think you can come into my house in front of my peers and humiliate me?" I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up into his eyes. I didn't pull away. I didn't flinch. I just stared at him with clinical detachment. I could feel his grip tightening, his panic rising. But I wasn't afraid. "Let go," I said calmly. My voice steady the way someone speaks when they know the outcome of a battle long before it's over. "Yow," he hissed, leaning in closer. I could smell the sour, stale wine on his breath, the remnants of his confidence now slipping away. "Or what?" I asked. His grip tightened again, but I didn't budge. He leaned in his breath, coming fast and shallow. "You'll write another report. You'll toe on me, you ungrateful, treacherous little brat." His words, full of venom and arrogance, felt like nothing. I had long since stopped being afraid of him. I had stopped fearing him years ago when I learned that power isn't about intimidation or threats. It's about control, about knowing when to fight and when to stay calm. And in that moment, I knew he was finished. "I gave you life." He continued his words, growing more frantic. "I put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me, by destroying my reputation." I stood there unmoving, watching him unravel in front of me. For years, I thought he hated my career because it didn't make money. I thought he despised my choices because they weren't prestigious enough. But now, seeing him crumble under the weight of his own guilt, it became clear. It wasn't about money, it was about control. In his mind, he was the sun, and I was just a moon, meant to reflect his light or fade into the darkness. But tonight the moon had eclipsed the sun, and he couldn't stand it. "Your reputation?" I asked, my voice still calm but colder now. "I didn't destroy your reputation, Dad. I just turned on the lights." His grip loosened just slightly, the rage in his eyes faltering. He had no more power over me. He had nothing left. He could scream all he wanted, but he had lost. And I knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't going to intimidate me anymore. He staggered back, his hand shaking so violently. The wine sloshed over the rim, staining his cuff. The air between us was thick-heavy with his desperation, but I could feel the calm in me like a steady anchor. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, tapping the screen 3 times. I turned it around so he could see it clearly. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't some vague piece of evidence. It was a high-resolution image, clear, undeniable. The gala's catering invoice, the wine list, and the consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in his name. The moment he saw it, his face drained of color. I didn't have to say a word. The proof was right there in front of him, each photo a nail in his coffin. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through his panic like a scalpel. "You are the institution, and that is exactly why you're going to prison." He stumbled back again, the realization settling in like ice, but I wasn't finished. I swiped to the next photo, a screenshot of the federal statute under IRS code 4941. His eyes widened as he read the words. "You just admitted, boasted actually, that you used foundation money to pay for this night. That isn't a loophole, Dad. That's tax fraud. It's embezzlement." He tried to speak, but the words were stuck in his throat. I didn't wait. "And when you combine it with the inflated construction contracts I found in your grant proposal, it's a RICO case." The truth was so clear now, so final. I had been methodical, patient, waiting for the right moment to tear his world apart. And now, there was no escape. The room was silent, the weight of his own actions crushing him under the undeniable proof. "I already did," I said, as I uploaded all of it to a secure server shared with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The fight was over. I walked out through the service hallway, the sound of federal agents closing in behind me. The shouting, the sirens, the confusion, it all felt so far away. Outside, the air smelled like rain, fresh and cool, as if the world was cleansing itself. I got into my modest car, the engine humming softly, and dialed my grandmother. It's done, I said, the weight of the words sinking in. And him? She whispered. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. He can't hurt us anymore. For the first time in my life, I felt the noise in my head, the echo of his voice, the weight of his judgment. Silence. It wasn't joy, not exactly, but something like peace, something that had been missing for so long. As I drove away, I didn't look back. People like him think power makes them untouchable, that money and influence shield them from consequences, but truth always lands eventually. He had spent years treating me like I was invisible, like I was nothing. But I had learned that being overlooked is sometimes the greatest advantage. Ghosts walk through walls, ghosts see everything. And by the time they notice you, the checkmate is already set. I had taken back everything he thought he had stolen. I had built myself piece by piece, and now, for the first time in a long time, I was finally free.